I don't think I'm making a controversial statement in saying that metal music's demographics for its fans and musicians are predominantly straight males. If you're an LGBT person, which stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, it can be difficult to find themes, lyrics, or even musicians within metal that speak to your experience. Not only that, trying to find a fellow gay person who listens to metal can often feel like trying to search for a live unicorn that tap dances. In this episode, we're going to be examining some of the ways LGBT themes and culture intersects within metal music. My basic question is this: why do we see so few gay people in metal? Is it just that the musicians are closeted for fear it may harm their career? Or is it that straight people, particularly males, are naturally drawn to metal? I mean, I guess this makes sense. Metal is a loud, aggressive, and sometimes offensive genre of music. It's not light or airy, or particularly feel-good. You can't really dance to it. And, as a 1997 study of male dance troupes demonstrated, gay males make up over half of the membership of dance troupes. So its sonic qualities don't seem to offer a lot of what many gay males are looking for in music. But aside from how metal sounds, what about its lyrical content? Do metal bands write songs about being LGBT? Sadly, the answer is no, not really. All of you ardent metalheads watching this, ask yourself, how many metal songs about being gay can you think of right now? There are a handful of Judas Priest and Queen songs, maybe Love Child from Accept. On second thought, I don't exactly know what their song Balls to the Wall is about either, or that album cover. So maybe we can include that song as well, just to be safe. Beyond that, there are a few other LGBT needles in the metal haystack, but they're few and very far between. By way of comparison, if you want songs about World War II or fighting dragons as a topic, you won't have to look far. I would argue, however, that even though metal has few explicit LGBT themes within its lyrics, it does have one thing in common with LGBT people. Metal is an outsider genre. If you're gay, bi, or trans, there's a pretty good chance your sexuality makes you feel different from others, like you never truly fit in. And I think metalheads can relate to this. For me, metal was the one place I felt I could belong. I mean, I played sports, but I never felt like a jock. Chuck Klosterman describes the sentiment in his book Fargo Rock City. Metal, especially 80s metal, would say to the alienated kid, "You're not different at all. In fact, you're hypernormal." Instead of validating the sad reality of your teenage life, it created a different reality altogether. Don't have a girlfriend? Well, that's because you can't limit yourself to one woman. You're too fast for love. Not part of the popular table in the lunchroom? Those kids aren't really popular. You are. You're part of the Kiss Army, and we're a million strong. Metal told its audience that they were not different, even if it felt that way most of the time. When the stereo's on, you're among friends. Metal provides the perfect escapism while still instilling a sense of community for the downtrodden. Throw on some Metallica, and you're instantly part of the metal militia. But perhaps the biggest elephant in the room for this topic is how heavy metal views sex. Or rather, for the most part, it doesn't. The more elite forms of metal almost entirely shirk this topic. Fantasy, history, horror, religion, death, drinking are all pretty common themes, but sex really isn't one. That isn't to say that metal is entirely devoid of songs about sex, but the subgenres that tend to sing about those themes are often viewed as inferior forms. Metal purists tend to view 80s hair metal and metalcore as lesser and weaker genres of metal. Or, put another way, Poison's Talk Dirty to Me? Dude, that's so gay. Chuck Klosterman jokes that Iron Maiden never sang about girls unless they were slaughtering them. He states, if parents really wanted to keep their sons from getting the neighbor girl pregnant, the best thing they could have done was buy them several Dio albums and the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. For these reasons, you'd think metal would have a massive following within the gay community, especially as a way for teenagers to ignore their sexuality throughout high school, to say nothing of the countless homoerotic album covers. I think some of these reasons we've discussed also demonstrate why there are so few known LGBT metal musicians. There are a number of artists and gay themes in pop music, indie, electronic dance music, but it's extremely limited within metal. And there are thousands upon thousands of metal bands and millions of metal songs. I had a heck of a time trying to come up with even 5 gay metal musicians before I Googled the subject. Some of the most famous include Rob Halford of Judas Priest, and depending on how you define metal, Queen's Freddie Mercury. Beyond that, there's Gorgoroth Gall, Otep from Otep, Doug Pinnick from King's X, and Sean and Paul from the progressive thrash band Cynic. Metal also has a few transgender musicians, perhaps the most notably, and the only one I was previously aware of, was Life of Agony frontperson Mina Caputo. So what could possibly be the reason for this? Well, Keith Conn Harris argues in his book Extreme Music that women in particular have a strong aversion to metal. He states that the absence of women in metal, particularly within the extreme metal scene, is fundamental to metal, since the music's aesthetic is founded in notions of power, and power is culturally coded as a masculine trait. He further notes that the general constitution engendered by homosexuality and certain ethnicities also appears to present difficulties in incorporating extreme metal. Does this mean that metal music will never be particularly attractive to LGBT people, save for the odd fan? Lesbians don't seem to have a prominent place within metal unless they're shown kissing on an album cover or on stage at a Steel Panther concert. Gay males don't appear to make a serious dent within the world of metal, save for some of the band members I just talked about. There are also virtually no well-known transgender band members, so perhaps the core of metal music is one that just appeals to straight males on the whole. To change gears somewhat, in doing research for this topic, one theme that kept popping up was homophobia within metal. I'm going to use the story of Judas Priest frontman Rob Halford as a jumping off point. Halford, known as the metal god, is one of the most respected and influential metal singers. Not only does he possess a great set of vocal cords, he was influential in bringing the metal fashion sensibilities from the gay leather scene into metal, as discussed in episode 8 about the new wave of British heavy metal. Back in the day, to anyone who was either gay or connected to the gay scene, they instantly got it. Halford's sexuality has been described as an open secret within metal during Priest's heyday. Go check out the lyrics to Jawbreaker or these lyrics from Raw Deal. All eyes hit me as I walked into the bar. Inside then, the guys were fooling in the denim dudes. A couple of cards played rough stuff. New York, Fire Island. In hindsight, it seems so obvious why a label wanting to protect their act in the 1970s wouldn't have included the lyrics to that album. Anyway, what does this have to do with metal being homophobic? As I mentioned, Halford was closeted, at least to the public, in the 1970s, 80s, and much of the 90s. In 1998, he appeared on a segment on MTV and discussed his sexuality openly and came out to the world. A close friend has told me how much this event changed his entire attitude toward gay people. Until his idol came out, my friend was mildly homophobic. Suddenly faced with the fact that someone he looked up to could be gay forced him to reevaluate how he viewed and treated gay people. I have no doubt many others in the metal community did the same. Halford's coming out doesn't seem to have affected his career in the slightest. Judas Priest is still as revered as ever and still successfully tours to hundreds of thousands of fans every year. By Halford's own admission, in 1998, he told the Boston Phoenix he did not consider metal fans to be homophobic, stating, "A majority of people have been able to handle it in the metal community." That's all well and good for one of metal's most important figures coming out being viewed favorably by most metalheads, but it would be interesting to hear how he felt the metal community was toward him in the 80s and 90s. What sorts of homophobia did he and his fellow gay metal musicians and fans face back in the day? Sadly, I was unable to find much in the way of research on this topic. The only real example I can think of from back then is the 1986 film Heavy Metal Parking Lot, where several Judas Priest fans state you're gay if you like any other band. Oh, if they only knew. Still, it would be fascinating to hear how, say, the most brutal of Norwegian black metal bands and their fans treated members of the LGBT community. You know, besides John from Dissection's murder of a gay man in 1997. Perhaps one of the most infamous moments of homophobia within metal was Skid Row's frontman Sebastian Bach famously wearing an AIDS Kills Fags Dead t-shirt in the late 80s. According to his account, the shirt was handed to him as he needed a clean one after a show. So he put it on without first looking at the shirt, not realizing what it said, and was quickly whisked away by a photographer to have his picture taken in a magazine. As someone who's borrowed a shirt with a less than flattering slogan on it from a friend in a time of need, I can relate, and I'm inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt on this. He was an immature 20-year-old kid who acted without thinking in a time when anti-gay attitudes still ran quite high. Guys at this age are still trying to prove their manliness and assert their sexuality. One way people do this is by making fun of other sexualities. Dude, I can't be a homo. I just made fun of that gay guy. Of course, we all know of the kids who bully gay kids mercilessly as a coping mechanism before eventually coming out of the closet themselves. That's not to say I'm accusing Sebastian of being gay, just that he was immature and probably needed to do some thinking about it after the fact. And speaking of Sebastian, he's since apologized multiple times for the incident. He's donated $12,000 to an AIDS awareness charity and was even seen performing with an all-gay AC/DC tribute band. So I highly doubt he's homophobic, though I can't say his actions, innocent or not, did much to further LGBT attitudes within metal. It's not entirely uncommon to hear a statement like, "Keyboards and metal? That's so gay," from metal fans. We still have a fair amount of this kind of talk within much of society. Even South Park creators Matt and Trey have discussed this, where gay just means bad or weak, having nothing to do with homosexuality or being used in a homophobic way. Still, this sentiment and word choice has real-world impacts on LGBT people associating their sexuality with something that is negative, though the people using this term are often just lacking the proper diction to come up with another way to describe their feelings toward this instrument being used in metal music. Metal fans, like much of Western society, has undergone a drastic change in the zeitgeist over the past 30 years with regards to gay rights and societal attitudes. Media visibility, activism, and a whole slew of other reasons have helped to bring about this change. There are studies which argue metal fans tend to be more intelligent, or at least more intellectual, than fans of many other genres on the whole. Our music has complex musical arrangements and lyrics which cover the gamut of nerdy topics. That's not to say metal doesn't have its share of trite content, but your average metalhead tends to value something of intellectual substance in their music. At least that's been my experience. Where I'm going with this line of thought is that educated people tend to be more accepting of LGBT issues and people. I think a few examples further drive home this point of metalheads' general acceptance of LGBT people. In 2012, Gwar's Odorous Urungus went on a homophobic rant lasting several minutes during the band's performance in Toronto. Odorous stated Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson had an imagined homosexual relationship, and their manner of dress made them seem like, quote, a bunch of f***ing f***ings. The crowd was stunned into an awkward silence, causing some to boo and others to leave during the band's performance. It's difficult to say if this was just Torontonians being Torontonians, which is one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world, but the outcome is encouraging. It's difficult to tell if Odorous's rant was genuinely homophobic. I wasn't there, I didn't hear it, but much like Steel Panther's band members ragging on each other for being gay, both bands' shtick is to be funny, irreverent, and over the top. In Steel Panther's case, they're being deliberately absurd. They're utilizing parody to demonstrate the peculiarity of heavy metal's hypermasculine culture, particularly within the glam scene. You know, like how a band at one moment could call another band who used keyboards gay, and then go on stage dressed rather effeminately. To use another example, in 2014, following in Halford's footsteps, Sean and Paul from Cynic came out publicly as gay. A quick glance through the comments on Blabbermouth and other websites shows overwhelming support and positivity. Who cares if they're gay? They're great musicians. What they do in their home is their business. Seems to be the common refrain, as a story from Metal Injection indicates. Perhaps it's just a coincidence of the country I live in, Canada in case you were wondering, but having been involved in the metal scene for 15 years and having attended well over 200 metal shows with local bands and national acts alike, I can speak from experience and say that I've never really witnessed homophobic behavior from my fellow metalheads. Anecdotal though it may be, it gives me hope. I can't speak for LGBT metalheads in other Western nations, but I would imagine their experiences mirror my own if they live in countries with the same general acceptance of gay people. Before I wrap this up, this next story is too good not to share. Metal, like any other hobby, can be a great way to meet like-minded people. As it turns out, there was an LGBT club for metalheads based in Chicago in the mid-90s called the Gay Metal Society. I can only imagine what a group like this existing must have meant to those involved back in the day before internet use was widespread. Back then, if you were gay, there were only a handful of ways to meet other LGBT people. A gay bar or some other known gay hangout, stumbling across a gay person in school or perhaps work, or getting set up by a mutual friend. This club featured bi-monthly meetups and included a newsletter. It wasn't just that you met up because you shared a common sexual preference, but members of this club actually had a common interest to further bond its members. The flyer I stumbled upon also happened to contain an interview with none other than Rob Halford during his fight days. It's an interesting read, particularly since he does not out himself in the article, but the writer alludes to several LGBT themes within Halford's musical past. And speaking of gay meetups, there's a gay metal dating site called metalgay.com. Just to drive home my earlier point about finding another LGBT person who listens to metal being rather rare, the website's membership is rather lax, and as of this writing, does not have a single member from Canada. Much like the Gay Metal Society, metal music and its community of fans continues to provide a source of support, particularly for those who don't seem to fit in. Gay, straight, and transgender metal fanatics alike can continue to have a meaningful impact on the genre of music. Though metal music has an interesting, if somewhat lacking, history with LGBT themes and peoples, it is not devoid of compassion, and if you dig hard enough, you can find lyrics and fans who aren't afraid to show their rainbow-clad devil horns. And after an otherwise horrible day, sometimes a slammin' metal track can be the one thing to look forward to and provide a much-needed escape and offer one place to feel part of something bigger than yourself.